All right. Abraham Lincoln, page 141. Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865. In times like the present, men should utter nothing for which they would not willingly be responsible through time and in eternity. From the Second State of the Union Address to Congress, December 1st, 1862. Like many of young America's heroes, Abraham Lincoln was born into an ordinary family and grew up hardworking, self-educated, and honest. Despite Abraham's struggle against feelings of hopelessness and insecurity, he never ceased his good fight for truth and unity during America's deadliest war, the Civil War. Abraham tried his hand at several professions, including shopkeeping, for which he was too distracted, and practicing law, for which he was very well suited. But most remember him as the president who cautioned that a house divided cannot stand, and gave the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, which declared the freedom of all slaves. Just as he had in everyday life, President Abraham Lincoln tried to do what was kind, fair, and best for his country. He even chose several political rivals to serve in his cabinet. In the beginning of the Civil War, Abraham's main concern was preserving the United States, but as time wore on, he realized that man's unalienable rights were an even more just reason to fight. Some believe that Abraham went too far to preserve the Union and eradicate slavery. He arrested Confederate sympathizers without a warrant and called for an army before there was a declaration of war. Not even a great president will make perfect choices, but Abraham's heart remained earnest and true until the tragic day of his assassination. The following is from American Hero Stories by Eva March Tappan, chapter Abraham Lincoln, Pioneer and President. Once upon a time, a family of settlers named Lincoln lived in a log house in Indiana. It was hardly more than a shed, for it had neither floor nor windows. It had a doorway, but the only door was a curtain of bearskins. There was one boy in the family, a little fellow of 7 years, named Abraham. "My son is going to have an education," the father used to say. "He is going to cipher clear through the arithmetic." The boy went to school for a little while and learned to read and write. His mother taught him what she could. Among other things, she told him about the War of 1812 that had just come to an end and about the hardships of the soldiers. "Everybody ought to be good to the soldiers," she used to say. The child listened gravely, and one day, when he had been fishing, he came home empty-handed because he had given his string of fish to a soldier whom he had met on the road. When he was only 8 years old, his mother died, and then the house was lonely indeed. After a time, his father married again. The stepmother loved the little boy and did all she could to help him. He went to school only 6 months in his life, but he borrowed every book he heard of in the country for 50 miles around. He used to read them aloud to his stepmother and talk over with her what he did not understand. He was not quick to learn, but he never gave up a sentence until he had found out what it meant. Some of these books were Robinson Crusoe, Pilgrim's Progress, Aesop's Fables, the Bible, the Life of Washington, and a History of the United States. One other book was a copy of the Statutes of Indiana. He read these laws over and over again until he knew almost the whole volume by heart. In this book were also the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. He made himself some ink of roots and cut a turkey quill into a pen. For paper, he used a shingle. Then, when he was going to work in the field, he wrote a paragraph from the book on the wood, and whenever he stopped a minute to rest, he pulled out his shingle and read a little to think over when he was working. "I should like to be a lawyer," he said to himself, But even when he was 21, it did not seem as if he would ever be able to carry out his wish. Indeed, he himself thought that it might be a good thing for him to become a blacksmith, because he was so tall, 6 feet and 4 inches, and so strong. His father needed help, however, for he was just moving to a new farm in Illinois, and there was much for them both to do. After building a new log house, the next thing was to cut down some of the tall walnut trees and split them into rails for a fence. How Abraham Lincoln would have opened his eyes if someone had whispered what those rails would be used for 30 years later. The next thing that the young man did was to help a man build a flatboat and float the load of goods down the Mississippi to New Orleans. On their return, he hired out to work in this man's store, but in a year the store was closed. Just at that time, the Black Hawk Indian War broke out, and Lincoln volunteered. The men of his company chose him captain, and he was much pleased, though he had little notion how to drill them. He always had his wits about him, however, and could generally find a way out of his difficulties. One day his company were marching across a field 4 abreast when they came to a gate. The new captain had not the slightest idea what command to give to get them into single file so they could go through, or, as he put it, to get them through the gate endwise. So he shouted, "The company is dismissed for 2 minutes, when it will fall in again on the other side of the gate." The war lasted only a few months. Lincoln and another young man bought out the village store. Many stories are told of Lincoln as a storekeeper. One is that by mistake he charged a man 6 pence too much, and that very night walked 3 miles to the man's house to return the money. He did other things, then tie up sugar and tea, for the village schoolmaster had become his friend and was lending him books, hearing him recite, and correcting his compositions. Lincoln's partner was careless, and Lincoln himself was perhaps too much interested in study to watch him closely. The result was that the business failed. Then Lincoln said to his creditors, "I mean to pay that money, and if you will trust me, I will give you every cent that I earn above what is enough to live on." He owed $1,100. He used to speak of it as the national debt. Finally, he paid every penny of it, and that was why his neighbors called him Honest Abe. Keeping store was bad for his pocketbook, but something happened one day when he was behind the counter that was very good for him. A man who was moving west with his family drove up and said, "Look here, this barrel's in the way. I've no room in the wagon for it, and there's nothing of much value in it. I'll sell it for $half. Will you buy it?" To oblige the man, Lincoln bought the barrel, rolled it out of the way, and forgot all about it. Some time afterwards he came upon it, knocked the head off, and turned it over to see what was in it. At the very bottom was Blackstone's Commentaries, famous law books. Lincoln opened the volumes and began to read. "The more I read, the more interested I became," he said. He determined not to be a blacksmith or a storekeeper or anything else but a lawyer, and after much hard work, a lawyer he became. His studying did not stop then by any means, for he gave a certain number of hours every day to the studies that he would have taken up had he been in college. He worked hard on his cases, too. He went over the case in his own mind, thinking over all the reasons for believing his client was in the right. Then he tried to think of everything that the opposing lawyer could say to show the man in the wrong, and of what he himself could say in reply. In one famous case of which he had charge, he defended an old neighbor who was accused of murder. One witness after another said, "I saw him commit the murder." "What time was it?" Lincoln asked quietly. "About 11, they answered. "How could you see so clearly at 11 o'clock at night?" he demanded. The moon was shining, they said. Just where was the moon, and how large was it? He asked. They told him its size and in what part of the sky it was. Then Lincoln pulled an almanac out of his pocket and said to the court, "This is all the defense I have. This almanac declares that there was no moon on the night of the murder." The witnesses had made up their story together, but had forgotten to see whether it agreed with the moon. The man was declared to be innocent. Lincoln had been made a member of the state legislature and had been a congressman. In 1860, a meeting was held to nominate a Republican candidate for the presidency of the United States, and Lincoln was chosen. Of course, there were all sorts of emblems and decorations used in the campaign, but the one that people looked at most was two weather-beaten fence rails trimmed with flowers and streamers and lighted tapers. Over them was a banner which said they were two of the rails cut by Abraham Lincoln 30 years before. When he was asked about them, he replied, "I don't know whether we made those rails or not. Fact is, I don't think they're a credit to the maker. But I know this, I made rails then, and I think I could make better ones than these now." Lincoln became president, but there must have been many days during the 5 years following when he wished he had no harder work than splitting rails, for the Civil War broke out. The president is commander-in-chief of the army, and Lincoln set to work to study how to carry on war. He used every spare minute to read on the subject. Then he called the military committees of Congress together and laid before them the plan that he had made. They did not follow it, but today people who are wise in warfare say that if it had been followed, the war would have ended much sooner. One of his generals was so insolent that the members of the cabinet were angry and indignant, but even then Lincoln did not lose his patience. "Never mind," he said. "I will hold his horse for him if he will only bring us success." Every day crowds came to see the president, and almost everyone wanted some favor. One wanted to be postmaster somewhere else, another wanted promotion in the army, and many came to plead that he would pardon some soldier who is condemned to die for deserting or sleeping at his post. It is no wonder that the weary president said to his secretary, "I wish George Washington or some other old patriot were here to take my place for a while, so that I could have a little rest." Tired as he was, he would not send people away. Even when a man persisted in reading him a long, wearisome paper, he did not refuse to listen. "What do you think of it?" the author demanded. "Well, for those who like that sort of thing," replied the tired man, "I should think it is just about the sort of thing they would like." It was almost impossible for him to refuse to pardon a soldier. Perhaps he remembered that his mother had said to him when he was a little boy, "Everybody ought to be good to the soldiers." The generals objected. They begged him not to interfere, but still the president could not help writing pardons. "It rests me after a hard day's work," he said, "if I can find some good cause for saving a man's life. And I go to bed happy, as I think how joyous the signing of my name will make him and his family and his friends." One day an old man came to plead for the life of his son, a soldier who had been sentenced to death. "I am sorry I can do nothing for you," said the president, "but the crime is unpardonable. Hear what General Butler telegraphed me yesterday." And he read, "President Lincoln, I pray you not to interfere with the courts-martial of the army. You will destroy all discipline among our soldiers." Then the old man was hopeless, and he broke down completely. Lincoln could not bear to see his sorrow. Suddenly he burst out, "Butler or no butler, here goes." And he wrote that the boy was not to be shot without further orders from the president. "There," he said, "if your son never dies till orders come from me to shoot him, he will live to be a great deal older than Methuselah. At last the war came to an end, but only a few days after its close, the president was assassinated. The poet Walt Whitman expressed his own grief and that of millions of others in his poem, My Captain. In this, the captain is President Lincoln, the ship is the Union, and the voyage is the cruel war that had just come to an end. O Captain, my Captain, Walt Whitman. O Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done. The ship has weathered every wrack, the prize we sought is won. The port is near, the bells I hear, the people all exulting. While follow eyes the steady keel, the vessel grim and daring. But oh heart, 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 oh the bleeding drops of red, where on the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead. O Captain, my Captain, rise up and hear the bells, rise up. For you the flag is flung, for you the bugle trills, for you bouquets and ribboned wreaths, for you the shores a crowding. For you they call the swaying mass, their eager faces turning. Here, Captain, dear father, this arm beneath your head, it is some dream that on the deck you've fallen cold and dead. My captain does not answer, his lips are pale and still. My father does not feel my arm, he has no pulse nor will. The ship is anchored safe and sound, its voyage closed and done. For fearful trip the victor ship comes in with object won. Exult, O shores, and ring, O bells, but I with mournful tread walk the deck my captain lies, fallen cold and dead.